Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of RIRE 1x1 with Zach Friedland. And today I am sitting down with RIRE's featured composer from our 2018 season and a good friend and colleague of mine, the now newly minted Dr. Jordan Chase.
Hey, everyone. Thanks, Zach, for having me. I really appreciate it. And it's been great to stay in touch, collaborate, and just really continue our friendship as, colleagues and everything we've been doing. So thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to do anything with RIRE.
Thank you. And we will get to the part where you and I met, but I want to start by kind of going back and talking about the beginning of your musical journey, because you are also a guitar player, very avid classical guitarist. And so just kind of talk about the beginnings of what got you into music, both the performing and the composing.
Sure. Yeah, so I feel like I have a pretty interesting upbringing in terms of a very late exposure to classical music, composition, and everything. So really, I started playing guitar when I was about 14, and I just played by ear. So I just my friend taught me how to play a couple things, and I just watched videos and played whatever I could in high school. So by the end of high school, I thought I was, the best guitarist ever, just playing everything by ear. And then when I started college at Keene State College in New Hampshire, I realized I knew absolutely nothing. So at that point, I really kind of started over. I learned what a classical guitar was. So even though I'd been playing for a little while, I didn't actually play classical until I was in my freshman year of undergraduate. So at that point, I also didn't realize that you could be a composer. So I felt like I was surrounded by music, throughout high school, and I was writing songs, in bands and whatnot, but actually sitting down like as a composer and all of that was still new to me. So I started playing classical in my undergraduate, and I really enjoyed it. And then I started taking composition lessons, and it all sort of just launched from there. I think because of my late exposure, it actually really helped because, I didn't spend my life and my childhood practicing an instrument by myself for hours. So to me, I feel like I actually have the energy and the passion for it because I started so late. So I've always tried to stay on top of it. I've always loved classical guitar. I love collaborating with people. And the more I got into composition, I just kind of wanted to do something with both. So although I just finished school and my doctorate's in composition, I've always tried to stay on top of classical guitar, tried to always play with other people, and even now, like even writing music for guitar. So it is sort of an interesting background. And I always like to tell my incoming students, anyone who's a little overwhelmed with anything, I can always remind them that when I was an undergrad, I learned how to read music my freshman year. And I was sitting in an ensemble when somebody put a piece of music in front of me and I couldn't read it. So I think it's always, it's nice to, sort of tell my students that they're all going to be fine. If I could do this from where I started, I think anyone can do anything if you just, dedicate the time to it. So yeah, late start.
That's awesome. And I think it's really interesting that you developed those ear skills so early. Do you feel like that foundation of learning that way influenced not only like maybe the way you perform and the way you compose, but your overall musicianship? Do you feel like that foundation has changed anything about?
I guess it's just a little different where I didn't have any sort of formal training. So yeah, I used a lot of my instincts and, I went by what my ear led me to. So as a composer, I like to think about all of the things I've learned in my 30 years of college. But in the end, I still also like to really trust my instincts and do what feels right. But I do think, I don't know, I sort of take things from both sides, but it is a little different. Whereas I know I have some colleagues who have been, doing this since they were at a very young age. So it's definitely a little different for me. But as a musician, yeah, I try to just, I don't think it's the worst thing ever to start this late because then you develop different tendencies. But I definitely think it's, I became a much better musician once I started learning how to hear things and what it all meant. It all sort of made sense to me. It was actually the only thing that ever really made sense to me. It was just music connecting as a whole and how it all works. So I like to think of, my overall musicianship as just a combination of my upbringing and the amazing education that I've been fortunate enough to have.
Awesome. And so you mentioned you did your undergraduate at Keene State, which is a smaller school up in New Hampshire?
Yeah, mainly a liberal arts college. It was pretty random, actually, just to go there in general. So
yeah. And then you moved on to the Laundry School of Music of Bard College in Cambridge, Mass, where we met. You were 1 year behind me in the program. What are some highlights from that experience at Laundry? I know some of the things that we've done together.
Yeah,
But
yeah, many highlights from my time at Laundry. Yeah, I mean, I loved Laundry. It was so different for me coming from a smaller undergraduate program with a really amazing department and incredible professors and students there as well. But it was just a lot different to be immersed in this conservatory in the middle of a city, like just a completely different environment, let alone like this, the actual students there and everything. So I mean, I always had a great feeling about Laundry because my first composition professor at Keene State College, Heather Gilligan, had been colleagues with Jeremy Van Buskirk. So she's the one who really turned me on to Laundry and recommended it, and she went there herself. So yeah, so I mean, I was just really excited about it, and since I went there in the beginning, I felt like everything just felt really good. And yeah, then I remember I met you and some other students, and it was great to have to form this friendship with you guys because I was new at this conservatory. You guys knew the area a little more, so it was just great to get advice and everything. But in terms of highlights, I mean, it was just awesome to be in a city. It just was so different for me because I'm from a really small town in New Jersey. So just to really like be in the middle of a city, like right in Cambridge, and just have access to the resources at Laundry. I mean, there's some incredible students there, some great ensembles, incredible professors. My teacher, Dr. Paul Brust, he was he was quite an influence on me. He was really it's funny, he was really hard on me, and that's why I chose to study with him. But then I learned an incredible amount, and I feel like that really shaped a lot of who I am today. And I certainly wouldn't be where I am today. But yeah, I mean, some highlights. I mean, we had some crazy good teachers. Yeah, just I don't know, specific highlights. I would say, I don't know, with certain, we had certain professors like Jeff McDonald, our conducting teacher. He was amazing in his own right and really challenged all of us. And just to be around a musician of that level and to be challenged like that. For example, we were discussing the other day, you had to sing one part, you had to sing the second oboe, you play the second trombone in your left hand, and you conduct with your right hand. And it was just crazy. Like things like that were actually, in a way, like at the time, the scariest thing ever. But in the end, I kind of look at that as a highlight because to be challenged at that level was really incredible and really pushed me. And, just being surrounded by such talent all the time with my colleagues and everything, I felt like that in itself was a highlight, just to be pushed and to experience another level of musicianship and dedication.
I want to come back to Laundry in a minute, but based on what you said, you are now currently an adjunct professor at Towson University, and you will be taking a full-time position in the fall. And so congratulations on that.
Thanks.
And so my question is, how have some of these experiences at Laundry, and then, eventually if you want to bring up stuff from your doctor as well, shaped your own teaching?
Yeah, I mean, I like to think of myself as a combination of all of my biggest influences. There's never one teacher that I try to emulate specifically. And I feel like even in the material I use, I really take a combination of everything. I like to take resources from different classes and integrate them somehow, because I always feel if we just used one textbook and that's all they needed, then they wouldn't need me. So not only do I try to bring my own personal style into it, but I really try to take things from a lot of my professors, and just everyone has their own thing they do. And, I think almost everyone's teaching is shaped by a combination of their biggest influences. So I guess it really depends on what I'm teaching. But I think everything from Keene State College to Laundry to Peabody, I feel very fortunate to have been mentored by incredible professors in everything, like theory, musicianship, just everything that I've been teaching at Towson. I think I just kind of try to emulate a little bit of everything. And I think I'm getting more comfortable with it. In the beginning, I was just like, wow, like I'm actually on the other side of this. It seems so surreal for the first time when you're a student for so long. But now I'm really comfortable there, and my colleagues are incredible. The students are great. They ask great questions. I love all of my students. So yeah, I don't know, not necessarily one thing. I think I like to just take all of the best things that I've learned from the best professors and try to just, put my own spin on it.
Awesome. I want to go back to Longy, because I want you to talk about one of the pieces that you wrote during Longy that was, I know it was selected as a finalist, and I believe it was selected as the winner of our in residence ensemble competition. Why don't you tell us about that piece?
Oh, Quinta Long?
Yes, Quinta Long.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So I ended up, I was fortunate enough to win the Radius ensemble competition that my first year at Longy. So that was really exciting because to me, it's never about winning anything. It's just, just trying to improve and, be the best musician and composer I can be. So that in itself, I was kind of just really surprised to even have, won something like that. And that piece was really something for me because it was my first semester studying with Dr. Paul Brust, and he obviously has his own unique style of teaching and thinking, and he really pushed me outside of my comfort zone. It made me think about everything. So to me, even that's a much older piece, and I think I'm a much different composer now, but that was really my first piece where I thought about every single measure and every single note consciously, because with Dr. Brust, if I did anything and I couldn't describe why I did it or how it made sense or how it worked into the piece, then he would ask me why I did it. So just that sort of style of thinking made me really put a lot of detail into every single note, rhythm, time change, everything. He was really on me about that. So to me, I felt like it was actually a huge growth for me because I was just thinking in a much different way. And I had just this extra musical concept of this 5-part dialogue. So the title Quinta Long, he actually came up with that. So I'll give him credit for that one. But I thought it was a perfect title because the whole piece, I really had this dialogue between instruments, and it was kind of this conversation that sort of at times would seem argumentative, sometimes it would agree. So just having a concept like that, where I think in my undergrad, I was just trying to really just write music and experiment, and I didn't really have as much direction or concept, where when I wrote this piece, it was like this title was perfect. I had a concept that I felt like I really could stream this narrative through musically. So I think in that sense, even though it's an older piece for me, it was one of the, probably my first piece where I really had to think about everything. But yeah, it was a really fun time. And even stylistically, I'm sort of pushing more into this modernist language where I'm a little bit different now, but yeah, it was really fun, and they were an incredible ensemble. So just to work with them and get their feedback, and it was just, the whole thing was a really great experience for me. So yeah, a lot of different things happening at that time, but overall very exciting stuff.
And after that, you're now just finished your doctorate at the Peabody School of Music, or I believe it's called Peabody Conservatory.
Institute, whatever.
Yeah.
It's kind of, I've heard 5 different names for it.
What has that experience been like, going from Longy, which is still a relatively small school, even though it's a conservatory in the middle of the city, still relatively small. What was the real big school experience like?
Yeah, it was really different, coming from, I feel like I've had it, all of my schools have been so different, where Keene State College was it was actually a medium-sized liberal arts school, about 5,500 people. The music program was smaller, and then Longy was like this small conservatory. We had 200 or 300 students maybe.
About, yeah.
So yeah, so it's just really different. And then Peabody is part of Hopkins, so it's like a big conservatory, part of a huge university. So I feel like in my experience, I've really had 3 very different experiences with schools, and they've all been different. I feel like they all offer their own advantages. And I mean, Peabody was just, I've loved my time there. I mean, my colleagues and professors have been really amazing. And I think because of Longy, I actually felt really prepared for a school like Peabody, where I think coming out of my undergraduate directly, it would have been a bit overwhelming with, you've got 3 orchestras and just so much talent that I felt like it would have been a little much for me. So I think coming from Longy, it really prepared me. It showed me that I need to work super hard if I want to try to do something in this field, and just being exposed to that level of talent really prepared me for Peabody. So yeah, so Peabody was different, just a bigger conservatory, but then you have the resources of the university. So it's just sort of the best of both worlds to me, where I came from a liberal arts school, small conservatory, and now I kind of have both combined and everything. So yeah, Peabody's been really incredible, and I've met some amazing people, and I feel like I really sort of figured out my own sound in terms of a composer. I felt like when I started Peabody, I was still kind of experimenting with a lot of different things, taking in a lot of rep, but not really totally sure of my sound. And I think since I've been here, just working with my main professor, Michael Hirsch, he really helped me sort of figure out what I want to be like. So I sound much less like him the longer I've been here, but it's been more like me. So I think that in itself has been a really huge just achievement to sort of finally sit somewhere where I feel comfortable. Because, you know, as a composer, we're always experimenting with things, we're changing, we're influenced by so many things. So I think to really feel comfortable in the sound world is something that takes a long time. And I'm sure I'll still be changing for a while, but at least for now, I feel like I've kind of figured out what I want to do.
Yeah, I want to stay on that for a minute because I've been through it myself, and yeah, it's just such an interesting question, the idea of voice and style. And what advice would you give a fellow composer, a young composer, who's trying to find their voice?
Yeah, that's
How would
a
you
great
describe that
question.
process?
Yeah. Sure. Cool. Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I know we've talked about this a lot, you know, just seeing each other and how we've changed even over the years, like what has stayed the same, what has evolved. So it's always interesting, especially, you know, with you and me when we didn't see each other for a while and then we met up at the festival and it was like, oh, wow, you know, just to revisit each other's music. You see things that have changed, but there's also still some semblance of where we started. So yeah, I think that's really interesting. And a lot of my composition students that I work with now, I think the most important thing is to just expose them to as much rep as possible, to show them everything, you know, because we're in a time where style, you can kind of do what you want. There's not really like a set style that you need to do or that everyone is doing, because you just have a mix of so many things. So I think the most important thing is just exposure to repertoire. And I think even being at Peabody, being surrounded by incredible colleagues who are constantly like every day messaging me all these pieces to look at. I'm learning about new pieces in class. My professors are telling me to look into these composers, and just constantly like listening and seeing what can be done. I think that's been the biggest influence for me. And finding my own sound now, I feel like I really sort of developed it by just seeing what's possible, what other people do, and then taking a little bit of everything. But I think that's actually the most important thing, even more so than like a technique or anything. I think just exposure to rep and like really looking at scores and seeing how things are done. And learning about process also, you know, I mean, my process in writing has changed a lot. And I think that's also important. So I try to give my students a bit of everything, but I'm constantly trying to just show them things, even if it's the opposite of how they write. You know, I'll show someone who's writing something that's mainly in like more of a neo-romantic sense. I might show them something completely crazy or just totally opposite of their style, but I think you can always take away something from anything. Even now, I kind of think about that in terms of music. I try to really, I think anything I hear, I can take away something, you know, as if it's done well, I can really appreciate it. So I think just, you know, exposure to what's possible, I would say, is the main thing that I emphasize in my teaching.
Awesome. Yeah, I want to stay on that for a minute. Just break down your process for us when you're ready to go start a new piece, whether it be, you know, for chamber, for orchestra, whatever. Yeah, where does it begin for you?
Cool. Yeah, that's a great question, because I feel like process is something I've really developed as well. And in terms of my style and like where I'm at now, I feel like my process is actually the biggest influence, which helps me sort of get to this level where I feel good at in terms of aesthetic. So it's interesting. I've, you know, just being at Peabody, and you meet a lot of different composers, and everyone talks about the process, and you know, everyone does something a little bit differently. But the one professor at Peabody, Oscar Bedison, who actually in one seminar he discussed how he likes to write in these like chorales. He sort of writes just harmonies, straight harmonies. And if you heard his music, it doesn't, like, you would never think that. But when he discussed this, it had a huge impact on me, and how if you just, you know what you're going to do harmonically, and he was discussing how you can really take anything, no matter how crazy the texture is, you can always line it up vertically. And I think that was a huge influence for me, because before I might have spent time on the piano or guitar, sort of developing some ideas, improvising, seeing where it goes. But after that discussion, I started really just writing out chorales. And it's funny, the piece that we'll probably discuss a little more, the one I wrote for Rhode Island Recording Ensemble, was with this new process that I had just sort of started, but it just felt really comfortable to me. So now I actually just like to write harmonies. Like, no matter what I'm doing, if I just sit down, I'll write out a chorale. Then a lot of times I like to determine harmonic rhythm ahead of time. So I might have 8 chords, I might have 20 chords, but I like to just play the harmony, just straight up chords, and then I like to determine how long I might sit on it. And then once I have all of that figured out, I think I'm the most creative, because then I don't need a piano, I don't need anything. I know my harmony, and then I derive all of my ideas from that. So to me, I like to just write in harmonies, and then just, you know, try to be creative with it. And then if I'm not on a piano or a guitar, I feel like it's not as limiting, where, you know, I might limit myself to what I'm capable of, where I have my harmony, I know exactly what I'm going to do with it, and then I just kind of sort of figure it out from there. And I like to just have some sort of idea in my mind before I start. But I think having all of that pre-compositional harmonic work done, when I go to write a piece, I don't really have any times where I don't know what I'm going to do. Where in the past I might have gotten stuck, but I think if I know where I'm going harmonically, I can always just keep pushing ahead. So yeah, big influence just on this one composer. Just Oscar Peterson really discussing that process made a huge impact on how I write.
I'm smiling because this is so interesting. I feel like you and I have kind of crisscrossed almost in our approaches, because I was very, very harmony centric when I was at Longy, and over the past, I don't know, 3 years, 4 years, maybe I've made this transition where I used to think of music very vertically, and now I just think of it as lines. And how these lines intersect, and so I kind of it's for me, it's a lot of filling in the lines, and that's, you know, the harmony kind of evolves from that. It's like I know my endpoints, and I kind of figure out where I'm going. But yeah, it's just interesting. You listen to, you know, 5-10 different composers, you'll hear 5-10 different approaches, or variations on, you know, and then there's variations on that approach. But let's talk about Emanations, which is the piece you wrote for the Rhode Island Recording Ensemble in 2018. Just tell us about that piece, and we'll have a link to it in the comments so people can listen. But
cool.
You know, what was your inspiration, and what was it like writing your first band piece?
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, my first band piece, definitely interesting. So when you approached me with this idea, I was obviously really excited about it, and I had no idea what I was going to do with it. So it was different, because I've composed for a large ensemble before, but never band. So I'm used to having like strings and having that sustain, and it's just like a whole different world when you get into band. You know, you don't have strings, and that's really the essence of the orchestra. So it was actually perfect, because I took a seminar called Wind Band Orchestration with Dr. Joel Puckett at Peabody, and he's a fantastic teacher and composer in his own right. So he exposed us to a lot of rep. Like that was most of the class, was just going through these pieces, talking about process. And he showed us like so many different sides of the spectrum, to where pieces are completely based off timbre, and then you have other pieces that are driven melodically, like very strongly. So I think that was really great for me to just jump into these pieces and sort of dissect them, talk about the composers. He actually brought in some composers to talk to them directly, so that was even more beneficial. So I think it was actually a perfect time for me to like take this class, learn about all this wind band rep, talk to some of these composers, and then when you asked me to write the piece, I was like, yeah, totally. Now I'm like, you know, I felt much more comfortable with it. So Emanations was really fun to write it, because like I said, my first band piece, so I had to figure out how I was going to do this. And my piece in general, I feel like, is not your typical band piece, as you know, and as I've heard from feedback, which is fine with me, and you know. So when I was writing, yeah, go ahead.
No, I mean, I was going to say that that's the thing about band right now, is just there's so much new music. You know, I mean, you talk about how we're in a time where no one has to conform to style, and it couldn't be more true for the band. It's just everyone's trying everything, and
totally. And that's kind of the most exciting part, is that like stylistically, it's like anything goes, and the band rep just doesn't exist the same way, you know, in the same realm as orchestra, who's got hundreds of years. So with, I think, band music, it's fantastic, because a lot of these directors are really open to anything, and they're really into new music, and everyone can, like, stylistically, you just do whatever. So it's kind of fun. So when I wrote Emanations, it was that same process that I just discussed, where I really just took harmony. So I just wrote out this like long chorale, and a lot of times I'll even look at like some of my favorite, you know, neo-romantic composers, or I feel like have a really strong sense of harmony, like Richard Strauss. I love, you know, like Bach is like obviously one of my favorites. So even, you know, I'll go back to the Baroque era and just see like, what did they do harmonically that works so well, and like how could I maybe infuse that with my work. So for Emanations, I wrote this chorale, out. And then I had this idea of just these, shifting textures all over the place, and like very oriented with timbre. And that was sort of my goal when I was writing it. So yeah, writing this piece, just chorale, and I was just sort of basically taking different parts of the ensemble and having these overlapping textures everywhere. So I created this sense of micro polyphony. So I've got 7 against 6 against 5 against 4 against 3 against 8. But it's not like I ever want you to feel this rhythm, and I don't expect the players to. It's more about just the combination of overall sound. So that was sort of my goal, was just to create this like sonorous sound world that just sort of has this constant idea throughout. And with that many instruments, you think about how many combinations, like how many polyrhythms can I really stack, and then what permutations can I apply within the ensemble to get different sounds. And you think about register, and there's so many things you can really do with it. So that was my plan when I was writing it. And it's funny because some of these parts, they just have like tuplets going forever. And I was thinking, like, when these players see these parts, they're going to think I'm like some like psychopath. But then when they hear it together, it'll make sense. So that was my goal. So it was always fun discussing that with some of the players, because a lot of them after it and during the process were like, wow, this is way different than what I was expecting. Because when your part is just like a tuplet for 8 minutes straight, you don't really know how it's going to fit in. So a lot of it was just creating these textures, and then just applying different timbres and techniques. And I don't know, a lot of like with winds, I like to do a lot of things with air sounds, and then a lot of mutes and the brass. So yeah, it was fun. I had a really good time writing it, and then discussing it with players was a lot of fun. And a lot of them were saying they've never really played anything like that. So overall, it was a really fantastic experience. I feel like I learned a ton about the band and just the balance in general. And that whole weekend of the festival, getting to know the players and discussing certain things with the players afterwards, I felt like I learned a lot about certain things that work better and certain things that don't work as much. What timbres really pop out? You think about soft and hard timbres within this ensemble. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. That was pretty much the process. Wrote a chorale and then made 1,000 textures out of it.
Yeah, no, it was so creative. And yeah, I think that first evening rehearsal, the players were trying to figure out exactly what was going on, and then once they kind of all realized, oh, okay, I'm just this one thread in this kind of interweaving maze of sounds, and it kind of yeah, so
totally. Yeah, it's not like anyone's ever, there's certain parts where I want people to pop out, but I think in terms of balance, it's tricky, because you all have to blend. Like if someone pops out too much or not enough, it might mess up the overall texture I want. So in that sense, a lot of band music, it's like driven melodically, and you have certain sections that are going to pop out. So I think that was probably the hardest part about my piece, was getting that balance and the blend just right.
And we recorded it 1 on a part, I believe.
Yeah, which to me, was my first band piece. So you asked me how many people I want playing this part. I was like, 1. Like I didn't even think of it, like, because I'm just so not used to that. But in the end, I feel like it made sense, because everyone has some sort of role, and I felt like if one part had more than one person on it, that would pop out. So like we just discussed with this kind of piece, it really has to blend. By having multiple people play the same thing, it might pop out a little more. So I learned that. I didn't know that you could have 10 clarinets playing one part.
You can yeah.
It was a good learning experience.
Yeah, for sure. And so now, jump ahead a little bit, you have just finished your dissertation piece. And I believe there was a paper that went with it.
Yeah, it's a little.
Why don't you just tell us about the whole project? What was your dissertation focused on, both the piece and the writing?
Sure. So these can go up to 2 hours, right? Because I might need a while. Yeah, so my paper was, in a way it was separate, but also sort of connected. So my dissertation topic was about semiotics and music, and how they influence one another, which sounds a little dense, but really all it means is, like, if there's an extra musical concept associated with a piece, how does that influence the listener? And, is the listener, how do they consider this piece in the context of what the extra musical content was? And how does it change their experience based on their knowledge of this content? So that's literally my whole topic. So I discussed a couple different pieces and their extra musical influence. And some of them have like a very strong, not programmatic, but have these concrete motivic elements that represent certain things within the music. So I like to discuss how one might hear this, if they were aware of this, how you might not hear this, and how your influence could change based on your knowledge of this. So that was really my whole paper. And not that that doesn't have to do with what I do, just sort of a separate topic. But then when I think about my pieces and their titles and, you know, what goes into them, it certainly does make a difference. Where if you read my program notes, my inspiration about something, like how does that impact how you hear it? And I mean, that applies to anything, you know, even, you know, a lot of like your music or anybody's music will clearly make more sense if if the listener chose to engage with the program notes. So something like that was just sort of important to me, because I feel like I've had several different experiences with pieces where I'll discuss something with classmates or something and they don't necessarily like it or understand it. And then if we go into like, did you read about like what it meant and, you know, what inspired this piece, and it makes a big difference. And generally the people who didn't like it for whatever reason, they didn't choose to engage with this sort of extra musical content. So to me, I just think that's really important to understand the composer's intent. So it's not even about like composers, I mean, at least to me, it's not like we care that much if you, I mean, we obviously care, but it won't hurt our feelings if you don't like it, because this is very subjective. But I think more importantly, like, do you understand it? Like, was my intent clear? Like, even if you hated it, as long as you understood what I was trying to do and you felt like my message was communicated, then I think that means more to me and a lot of my colleagues as composers as well than, you know, if they just like it or not, just based on aesthetic. So I think intent is definitely something I like to emphasize. So, yes, so my dissertation, my actual final composition was a series of guitar works. So this was fun because I had a guitar solo, I had a guitar quartet, and then the final piece was a guitar solo with 5 pre-recorded guitars. So to me, it was really fun to just sort of write all of this guitar music. It's something I've always wanted to do, but I didn't really do until I got to Peabody. I think I needed to sort of develop my own skills a little more, and because guitar is my instrument, I almost felt like I couldn't touch it. You know, I needed to like really get to a more mature place before I tried to even contribute repertoire for my own instrument. And they're all very different pieces, and I think you could even see like some growth within all of them, and they're all connected. It's all me, but I think in terms of my style, you see it really start to shape and become even more concrete by the last one, which was the solo guitar with pre-recorded guitars. And so they're all different. They have different titles. So the solo is called Nevermore. So that was a guitar solo inspired by the mysteries surrounding the death of Edgar Allan Poe. So that was sort of its own thing. The quartet was called Between Earth and Sky. So that was just sort of this abstract concept of like, you know, what's between earth and sky? Like, you know, like we don't really know. And it's sort of just something more abstract, but something that really, you know, I was trying to represent musically. So it's not like it had a programmatic focus, but just even understanding that and hearing the piece would probably make more sense based on some of the sound world that I try to create. And then the final piece was titled In Realms of Passing Dreams. So sort of this dream-like sound world and these sort of elements that are always kind of there. And it, same thing where I'm really trying to just create this atmospheric sort of textural, timbral landscape throughout. And in terms of knowing the intent for that, I think it would definitely be a little more clear if the listener was aware of this rather than just hearing it. So that's sort of my goal. So not that I'm going to go in depth about each piece in the program notes and all of that, but just having some idea that is present, even just as a narrative throughout your piece, I think makes a lot more sense to my listeners if they engage with that. Whereas if you just listen to it, I mean, you may or may not like it, but I think my intention will be much more clear if you understood. So really, so sort of separate in terms of the paper and my actual pieces, but also connected in that sense. So it was really fun to just write all of that music for guitar. I think it was about 30 minutes total, maybe a little more. And they're all separate pieces. Just as a whole, it was sort of my like trilogy of guitar music. So it was really fun to sort of contribute to my instrument for my final thing. It felt like I sort of came full circle. Like this is where I started and this is where I'm going to end. So yeah, it was really fun and obviously relieved to have turned all of that in actually less than a week or maybe a week ago today. So I'm still sort of I don't know, realizing that I'm done. I've been anticipating deadlines for years. So I don't think it's really hit me that I'm completely done with school yet. But
did you have to do the format check for your document? And so is
what do you mean?
For the written document, at some schools, like at Ohio State, we had to do a format check where somebody actually goes through and measures the spacing and the margins and everything.
I never had to do that, but I
Oh,
can
lucky.
assure you, I can assure you, I was my advisor who helped me write my document. I think he intimidated me enough that I made sure that the formatting was perfect
Yeah.
before he even saw a draft. So not a formal process, but
Yeah.
I can assure you the formatting was on point.
Awesome. Do you have performances and recordings lined up for the guitar music?
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know
totally.
everything's kind of on pause right now, but
Yeah,
um,
yeah. So maybe by 2030, it'll all be no. So I'm very optimistic about the situation, as terrible as it is. I'm really hoping things will be back to normal in the fall. And like we've discussed, there's not much we can do, but really just be optimistic, try to be productive, and hope for the best. And even by you hosting these meetings, this is a great way to engage with composers and conductors, and I think this is really fantastic you're doing this. So just one way of being optimistic and still being productive in all of this right now.
yeah,
So
no, well, I mean, the main inspiration was that, hey, we should do something while everyone's sitting at home that, they can kind of engage with musicians. But, also I'm really glad because we have 6 years of history of RIRE by now, and it's been fun to just, go back, and this is kind of our way to document it all.
totally. Yeah. I
And
mean, and maybe you might not have been able to find the time to like really sit down with all these people, and this is great that you're going to have all of this footage and just one-on-one interviewing of our experience. So yeah. But in terms of my pieces and performances set up, the solo was actually already premiered and recorded. So that's I mean, obviously, I'm hopeful for more performances, of course. But the quartet was actually supposed to be played this semester by Manuel Berhueco's guitar studio. He had 4 of his players were working on it. We were going back and forth with rehearsal notes. I was pretty excited. So it's unfortunate that was postponed until the fall, but it'll still happen. So I'm not too worried about it. But it was cool because I had there was someone sort of leading the rehearsals. So he would come back to me with notes from it, and we were going back and forth. And I think we were approaching a point where I was going to come to a live rehearsal. So I was like so excited. I was right there, and then all of this happened. But it's all of us right now. We're all missing out on things. So
the great equalizer. It's not like anyone's getting
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
we're all in the same boat right now.
Yeah.
So I'm hopeful that performance of the quartet will happen in the fall. That'll be in Baltimore. So that should be exciting. And then the solo piece I wrote for my good friend John Marcel Williams, who's doing his artist diploma at Curtis. He is incredibly talented, and I've been talking about this with him for a while, about writing him something. And this year when I started working on this piece, we've been discussing ideas and just some of the rep that he likes to play. So this has been like a work in progress for a while. And so this piece is going to be more of a process because you have the pre-recorded guitars. So he's going to have to learn 6 guitar parts and record them all separately. And then in the performance, I'm going to have them projected on speakers. So he's going to be like the live soloist. And then I have them set up so they're panning left and right, somewhere in the middle. So it's going to create this sort of like oral experience that you won't be able to get really in any other set. So that's we're hopeful to premiere that in the fall, but we'll see depending on things, either the fall or spring. So that's going to be a bit more of a process, but I'm really excited about that because he's incredibly talented. He's just sort of like humbled to even write somebody of that talent a piece. So to have him play 6 different guitar parts, have those recorded, and then premiere it, I think is going to be pretty incredible. So something else to look forward to. And as terrible as all of this is, this gives us all more to look forward to in the fall.
Exactly. Hopefully everything will just come at once. And I know you told me earlier that right now you're working on taking a break, but what do you see any big projects coming up? You got anything brewing in your head?
Yeah, well, yeah. So I like break just as in when you finish any piece, you need some time off.
Oh, of course.
I mean, unless you can't, because even when I actually wrote Emanations for RIRE, I just finished like my orchestra piece, did all the parts, like finished that, and like the day I finished that, I started working on the band piece. So that was a good example of like not having a break. But because it was large ensemble to large ensemble, I was actually in that zone, where I think it takes you have to adjust for a minute when you switch from something so big to so small. So because those pieces were both so big, I actually felt like that transition was good. I was already, it's like I was used to looking at 30, 40 staves, so keep it going.
Yeah.
But right now I've been talking to my girlfriend who I'm actually quarantined with, Irene Hahn. She is an incredible new music cellist. So we thought of I can't think of a better time to write a cello solo than right now, because it's something that would
player.
Yeah, I got the player, and she's actually, I'm gonna work on it. I'm gonna workshop it with her like every couple days, and I think it's a really good opportunity for me to write something that I might not necessarily have thought to or just had the time to in general. So I think to write a solo piece for something that's not my instrument, that's really hard in general. But by having her here with me, I think it's a fantastic opportunity to try a bunch of different sounds and really write a solid piece. So that's my next project right now, actually. So I've been thinking about it a little while. We've been discussing some ideas, so I'm excited to jump into that. And I think that, I don't know, if I come out of this and I have a really great cello solo, then I would say that's also a win. Something I might not have been planning, but so that's the project right now. So hopefully I'm sure I'll have that done, within this quarantine, whenever that may be. But really just taking advantage of having her as a resource and, just as an incredible player as well. So I'm excited to get going with that.
Last question: when Jordan Chase is not composing or teaching, what do you like to do when you're not making music?
Okay, yeah. I
always ask everyone this question because I think it's important to know a little bit beyond.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, we're all real people.
Especially in a job that can consume you.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. And you know how it is. Like when we're busy, we're just doing work all the time. But no, I think it's really important as well. And even all my students at any level, I always like to engage with this. And even one of my first composition professor at Keene State College, we used to actually talk about fantasy football before every meeting. I mean, during the season at least. So before every lesson, we take 10 minutes. So it's like, all right, you're working on this piece. I'm glad you made progress. But more importantly, like, who are you starting at quarterback? Who's on the waiver wire? So like, so it was just, I thought it was the first time where I was just like, oh, like, musicians are also normal people. And like, that was like a big inspiration for me to think about even being a professor. And it's like, oh, I can still be a normal person. So with that in mind, I love sports. I'm obsessed with like football, basketball. I love playing sports. I love to snowboard, so I like to be outside a lot and just get my mind off of things. So right now, it's hard because those hobbies that I like doing are also restricted or not even happening at this point. But those are my main things. It's funny. I actually went to New England to snowboard. Like in high school, I cared about it so much, and I wanted to go somewhere where I'd be closer to mountains. And then the busier I got with all my schoolwork, the less time I actually had to snowboard. But I still try to make time for it. Now that I'm finally done with school, I think I'll be able to really dedicate some time to it every year. I think it's just important to be on a mountain, like just really clear your mind. I can't think of anything else more therapeutic than being on top of a giant mountain in the middle of nature. And yeah, so just that, pretty much snowboarding and sports are what I care about. It's just always been my thing. And I think for me, it's just so, like sports are just so not related to music. So for me, it's a good way to really shut off my brain. Because as you know, we get so wrapped up in this and it can really consume our thoughts. So I think it's important to just you definitely have other hobbies that can sort of take our mind away from it. And even I tell that to my students too. I'm like, that's great. You're, spending 10 hours a day on this, but go for a hike and don't think about this for a day. Because I think sometimes the best ideas and the most productive states are when we really recharge and we have that energy. Because it is a lot of mental energy, as you know, and you've definitely spent days straight working on something. So I think it's really important to have those extra hobbies, recharge your brain, just get your mind off it.
I've found once you get out of school, it gets easier. So you have that to look forward to.
Thanks. I appreciate it.
Before we go, controversial question. Thoughts on Brady and Gronkowski going to Tampa?
Oh my God, I don't want to talk about it. Oh my God, it's been bad. Yeah, this is like every Patriots fan's nightmare. This is funny. I actually thought you might bring this up because you knew I was in the Patriots. So yeah, this is really not. It's not good. So I think the only thing that could stop Tom Brady and the new Bucks is COVID-19. That's,
Yeah.
I think, the only thing stopping them at this point. So, I mean, I hate to see it, but I'm like a huge Patriots fan. I love Tom Brady and Gronkowski. So I wish them the best. And, you know, we're Patriots fans are so used to just winning and having this amazing dynasty that we're just not, you know, having to rebuild, but also having them still in the league is just a huge blow for us. But it's okay. It was bound to happen. And I think Jared Stidham, MVP, at some point, calling it now. You heard it here first. So it's all good. It's, you know, it's terrible, but I'm also not someone who's going to let it ruin my life. As much as I love it, it's like, it's just sports. It's okay.
Yeah.
But, yeah. I think my mom's more upset than me. She's not handling it well. Big Tom Brady fan. Every morning we have coffee. She's like, I just can't believe Tom Brady's not with us anymore.
You guys are Patriots fans from New Jersey. That's
yeah, there are some.
It's a rare breed. Well, it is always a pleasure to sit down with you, even if we are 500, 600 miles away. Best of luck with your new cello project. Before we go, tell people where they can find you, website, social media, whatever.
Sure. So jordanchasemusic.com is my website. So I try to keep it pretty up to date with everything that I'm doing and any new music that I'm putting up on there. So that's the main place I would go. And just want to say thanks again for hosting me, staying in touch and everything. You know, since launching, I think we've always done a really great job of staying in touch, and it's been really interesting to hear about, you know, the differences in our programs, where we're at, and it's always been nice to have a friend that we can, you know, relate to, and just even though we're far apart, we're always, you know, we're still in the same field, and it's been really great to always connect with you and then reconnect at the RIRE Festival. So thank you for having me here. Thank you for always checking in, being a really great friend.
Well, thank you very much. It's same to you. You know, that's what makes the job worth it to me, is the people you meet and the ones you can stay in touch with. And so it's been a pleasure the whole way. For more information about us, you can go to www.rirecording.org. You can see a whole collection of RIRE one-on-one interviews. And for more about me, www.zjfmusic.com. Till next time, thank you for watching. Thank you to Jordan, and stay safe, stay healthy, and please stay home. Thanks.